Okay, I want to invite everyone to our Siyum of Masechet Yoma. We've already started Masechet Sukkah, although it's not too late to join. But if you, we're going to continue. We're going to finish tonight Masechet Yoma together. The Siyum of Masechet Yoma is dedicated by Esti Ben David and Rachel Keren, whose maiden name to Orbach, in memory of our parents who opened the gates of Torah for us and guided us through them. In memory of our late father, Ephraim Elimelech Orbach Zichrono Livracha, whose 30th yahrzeit we have just commemorated. During his lifetime, our father never stopped learning and teaching generations of students. Through his research, he developed new, extensive, and diverse fields of learning and research, as testified by his numerous books and academic papers, the Sages, Concepts and Beliefs, the Tosafot, Baalei Tosafot, the Halacha, its sources and developments, Arugat HaBosem, and many others. And in honor of our dear mother, Chana Orbach, may she live a long life, who is currently celebrating her 103rd birthday, Ad Mea V'Yaslim, and who has been throughout her life a model for all her descendants of the love of Torah, its study and practice. Thank you for the beautiful dedication. Okay, the order of events tonight, we're going to learn together the last daf of Yoma. It's a kind of, let's say, interesting, a little bit out there daf, not what you would expect for the end of a Masechet, but we will see and we will explain and make it very meaningful. And then we will hear from Shuli Mishkin, Tanya White, and two of our Hadran learners, Dr. Rena Basser and Vicky Harari. So with that, we will get started with our learning. I want to just mention a few short announcements. Actually, I'll do them at the end. Okay, let's start. We're starting from the bottom of Pezayin Amud Bet. Amarav, Tfilat Ni'ilah Poteret et Shalavit. I'm going to go back a little bit to things that we did already. Rav said that if you daven Ne'ilah, we're going to see a bunch of surprising things in today's daf, things that you wouldn't have expected. Okay, this is a good example of when we learn Gemara, often we learn things that are not what you see happening around, right? Normally, how does Yom Kippur end? We say Ne'ilah, and then we say Arvit after, and we don't say Ne'ilah when it's time for Arvit. We say Ne'ilah when it's still daytime, or at least getting toward the end of, but it isn't yet nighttime. It certainly wouldn't exempt you from Arvit. But Rav says that if you say Ne'ilah, it exempts you from Arvit. You don't need to say Arvit, which actually would be pretty convenient because I find everybody always struggles at the very end of the fast. And all of a sudden we have to daven. We've been davening all day long. And now we're davening this extra davening, which almost feels like we've been davening all day. Why are we davening this extra prayer? So Rav, in fact, says something you might actually, at first glance, you say, what are you talking about? Second glance, you think, oh, wow, this sounds pretty reasonable. We've already been davening all day. We just said this prayer and presumably Rav thinks that Ne'ilah was really said when it was already nighttime. So therefore he says it exempts Arvit. And then we said, well, just go back a little bit. Rav l'tamei d'amar tzloti yitzerati. It says he actually thinks it's a whole prayer. Again, this is something that Shmuel had said. It's not actually a full prayer. It's just, right, it's not a Shmona Esrei. You don't say the silent Amidah. So he thinks you do, and that's why he thinks, since you already daven, you don't really need it. To which the Gemara had asked, did Rav really say this? How could he say it exempts you from Arvit if he's the one who held, going back to a famous machloket in Masechet Brachot, is the prayer of Arvit just optional or is obligatory? Okay, there's a whole Tosfot here, a very long Tosfot on this daf, which talks about when they say Tfilat Arvit Reshut, it can't possibly mean it's fully optional. Okay, and Tosfot kind of says, well, it's something in between, not exactly optional, but it's not fully an obligation. But in any case, if Rav thinks that the halacha is that Tfilat Arvit is optional, then there's no reason to have anything exempt you from it if you're never actually really obligated. So they say, well, L'divrei ha'omer chovak amar. He was saying that if you hold this an obligation, even though I don't hold this an obligation, then you would be exempt. There's a very interesting ramification of this for women. Okay, but since many of us are women, I may as well bring this up, which is there's a big famous debate about how many prayers women are obligated to say by Torah law. And some people, or by rabbinic law even, I won't get into all the details of it, but some people say the Sephardi approach is to say you're actually only obligated one prayer a day, and it doesn't even have to be a full prayer according to some opinions. Ashkenazim actually hold that you have to pray 2 times a day. Which 2 times? It's not any 2 times, but it's Shacharit and Mincha. And the reason is because Tfilat Arvit is only optional. It became an obligation for men because men accepted it upon themselves. But the women, since they never accepted Marav upon themselves, it never became an obligation for them. happens that the Aruch HaShulchan has a unique opinion, and he actually says that women are obligated in all three prayers, because since women, the reason why, and then it's a whole sugya in brachot, if you remember, we learned it about women. There's different versions of the text and why, and even what isn't it time bound, women should be exempt, but they say, no, it's rachamim. Women need rachamim as well. They need to pray for mercy. So therefore, once they're part of the obligation, they're part of the obligation all the way, all the prayers. So according to Aruch HaShulchan, even Mariv, even Arvit, the nighttime prayer, women are obligated. It's an interesting opinion that is often not quoted, but it's interesting, and I thought to mention it here. Anyway, we're now getting to the next question on Rav. So the first question was, how could Rav have said it? Doesn't he hold it's reshut? And then we say, don't worry, he holds it's optional. He meant if you hold it's an obligation, the Ela will exempt. Comes the Gemara and brings a bright, Meitiv, or Yoma Kippurim mitpalel sheva umitvadeh. Shacharit sheva umitvadeh. This brighta goes through all the different times of Yom Kippur, what prayer you say, how many blessings in the Shmona Esrei. We call it Shmona Esrei, which is 18. It really has 90 blessings because one was added. But oftentimes on holidays, it only has 7 blessings because 3 in the beginning, 3 at the end, which are part of every prayer, and 1 in the middle. So this Braita says, the night of Yom Kippur, you pray 7, and within your prayers, the 7 brachot, after you finish, you, right at the end of the silent prayer, mitvadeh, you do vidui, you do the confession. Shacharit sheva u'mitvadeh, musaf sheva u'mitvadeh, v'ni'ilah mitpalel sheva u'mitvadeh, Arvit mitpalel sheva me'en shmonas. So here you have a list of all the prayers, and it says after Ne'ilah what comes? Arvit. So what do you see here? If you're going to daven Arvit, that must mean that you're going to pray also Ne'ilah and also the nighttime prayer. That seems to go against Rav. But let's see the 2 different opinions here. According to this opinion, Arvit mitpalel sheva me'en shmonas. How many blessings do we pray in Arvit? We pray the usual 19. But according to the Tanakama here, the first opinion, you only pray 7. The middle blessing, you make a shortened version, which we also learned in Masechet Brachot. It's interesting. We're having all this review of Masechet Brachot here. Those who started Sukkah know that Sukkah becomes this big review of Masechet Eruvin and Shabbat. This is really a review of Masechet Brachot. And it says you daven this shortened prayer because what's the issue? Very fascinating. The rabbis understand that you want to eat and everybody's hungry from fasting all day, so they make a short arvit so that you can quickly get to eat. Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel mishum abotav, he says in the name of his fathers, mitpalel shmonasrei shlema. You pray full 18 blessings, right? Later it became 19. Mipnei shetzarich lomar havdalah bechonen hadat. Actually, at his time it already was 19. I don't know why he says 18, but I think he means basically the Shmona Esrei. You'd say all the middle ones. Because there's in the first blessing of the middle section, it's called a tachonen, and you add a special blessing every time the holiday ends, and you say we're separating between Kodesh and Chol, and you have to say that on Motzei Yom Kippur. You can't ignore that blessing, and if you say this quick, shortened version, you're not going to be able to do that. So how could it be? Okay, going back now, what was our main point? We learned this interesting machloket. Again, we see something that, right? Rav said something that we really don't see, which is if you daven Ne'ilah, you don't have to daven Arvit. Now we're seeing that some people thought that you didn't actually have to daven the long version of Arvit, and you daven the shortened version. But we hold like Rabbi Chanina ben Gamliel, and that's why we don't hold like Rav. We say Ne'ilah, we say Arvit, we say the full Arvit. Okay, but there were other opinions that existed at the time. The main problem here is that the Braita said that you daven Ne'ilah and Arvit, and that goes against Rav. How could Rav disagree with the Braita? So the Gemara answers, by the way, Rav in many cases does disagree with Braitot, and this is just an interesting historical point, which is Rav was one of the first Amoraim and was a great man of his generation. And often he has the rights, even though generally we say the rules are you can't disagree with a Tanaitic source. If you're an Amora, Rav had the rights to do it. It often appears in the Gemara, Rav Tana hu upali. He is like a Tana. He has the status of a Tana, and he can disagree if he wants. Okay, he's I think the only person that this is said by. Maybe I'm missing, maybe once in a while they say about someone else, but he's the main person that it's used by. It doesn't say that here, and that's because the Gemara has a better answer. What's their answer? They only say that when they're stuck in a corner and they can come up with no better answer. So, the answer is Tanai. It's a machloket Tanaim. Okay, this is a debate between two different Tanaim. The Tanya, as it says in the following Braita, Here we're going to see there's a debate. Now the issue becomes Ne'ilah, and I don't know if you're aware of this in Israel, for example, we do Birkat Kohanim at Ne'ilah, but not every shul does it, and it depends on your timing and how you work it out. People try to end Ne'ilah early. If you ever notice, sometimes they do Avinu Malkeinu very slowly, and you think, oh my goodness, they're dragging out the prayer, but it's all because they want to get Ne'ilah to be said when it's still daytime, and you can still say the Birkat Kohanim, the blessing of the Kohanim, and therefore they do that earlier, and then they kind of have to stretch the end of the tefillah so that we don't end before Yom Kippur ends. So it says here, it's a machloket tamim. So if you say Ne'ilah during the day, then you're not going to be able to fulfill your obligation for Arvit, because Arvit has to be said at night. If you say it at night, then you could say, oh, it fulfills your obligation. So now we get into a totally different machloket, but clearly has to do with our topic. Titanya, as it says in a Braita, Kol chayavei tefilot tovlin kedarkam b'yom kippurim. Everyone who's obligated to go to the mikvah, okay, again, we're going to hear something very strange, goes to the mikvah on Yom Kippur. If you have to go to the mikvah, you go on Yom Kippur. Now, even though we learned you're not allowed to wash, right? However, we did see there were many exceptions to the rule. This is another exception to the rule. You're allowed to go to the mikvah if you need to go to the mikvah. Nida v'yoledet, here comes the list. A woman who's in nida, gets out, she finishes menstruating, yoledet, someone who gives birth. Tovlot kedarkam b'leilei Yom Kippurim. If the time for their tefillah comes out that night, and they're supposed to go the night of Yom Kippur, they go. Baal Keri, someone who has a seminal emission. He tovel v'holech ad mincha. Ezra instituted that anyone who's a Baal Keri, a man who has a seminal emission, we're going to deal a lot with this, okay, being that we're women, many of us, a lot of this is going to be something that is a little harder for us to relate to, but a man who has a seminal emission, he has to go to the mikvah before, according to the Tanakh Ezra, which eventually was rescinded. But at that point, it was still practiced, and you had to go to the mikvah before you learn Torah, before you daven. So imagine it's Yom Kippur, you're a Baal Keri, what do? You go to the mikvah. Kidarkan, regular way you normally do. B'leilei Yom Kippur, sorry, I went backwards. Baal Keri tovel v'holech ad mincha. If you have a seminal emission, a man, he goes to the mikvah up until mincha. If he already said mincha, or it's mincha time, and when they use mincha in the Gemara, sometimes they mean the time of mincha, and sometimes they mean the prayer of mincha. So he does it until mincha. Why presumably until mincha? Because after that, there's no more prayers. What does that show? There's no more prayers until nighttime. We can actually go to the mikvah, which shows the Ne'ilah must have been at night. That's gonna be the first opinion here, which is gonna match Rav. The second opinion is Rabbi Yossi. Rabbi Yossi Omer kol hayom kulo. He can do it all day because he's still, even after mincha, he still has Ne'ilah to say during the day, and therefore we allow him to go to the mikvah so that he can say Ne'ilah. So here's our debate: is Ne'ilah said at night or is it said during the day? And that would affect whether Ne'ilah could exempt your nighttime prayer or not. Now the Gemara says, wait a minute. That resolved our contradiction with Rav, because we say two different Tannaitic opinions. That already makes it okay, no problem. We have two Tannaitic opinions. Rav holds like one, the other Braita we quoted holds like another. But now we brought in this Braita about going to the mikvah, and comes the Gemara and says, wait a minute, that Braita is totally contradictory to another Braita. It says, Uriminu. Uriminu means, this is the first word I remember learning in Gemara, Uriminu, yesh kan sira. We all had to recite it in 6th grade. So here we have a contradiction from this Braita. Okay, it means two sources that are the same level contradict each other. Hazav v'hazava, hamitzorah v'mitzorat. So again, we're getting a list of all these people who need to go to the mikvah. Hazav and Hazava, we've talked about these people before. Mitzorah, mitzorat, leper, male, female. Bo'el nidah, someone who has relations with a woman when there's a nida, they also become tamei, impure. Utmei mate, someone who came in contact with a dead body. Tovlin kedarkam b'yom kippurim, they all go to the mikvah normally. Nida v'yoledet tovlo kedarkam b'leilei Yom Kippurim, also a nida, and a woman who is menstruating, or a woman who has a baby, also. Baal Keri tovel v'holech, here comes our contradiction. You're listening? Baal Keri tovel v'holech kol hayom kulo, all day long, according to Tanakama. And that doesn't bother us. The Tanakama in the first part said, Ada mincha. The Tanakama doesn't bother us, because what's Tanakama? It's an unnamed Tana. We don't know who he is. We don't know who said it. One unnamed Tana could be different from the other unnamed Tana. That's okay. But the problem here is that Rabbi Yossi appears in this Braita as well. Rabbi Yossi omer min hamincha ulamala ein yakol litvol. Once mincha comes, you cannot go to the mikveh. This is exactly opposite of what Rabbi Yossi said in the previous brayta. He said kol hayom kulo. To which the Gemara says lo kashya ha ditzale tfilat nila ha delot tzale. It all depends on whether he's already said Ne'ilah. Yes, Rabbi Yossi thinks Ne'ilah was said during the day, but there could be Ada Mincha, right? The first one was you could do a Kol Hayom Kulo because you haven't yet said the Ne'ilah. And the second source that said Mina Mincha Ulamala, he can't. Mina Mincha meant the time of Mincha, which was he'd already davened Ne'ilah, and then he's not allowed to go anymore because there's no point in him going. So that's a good resolution. However, we're going to have two issues. The first issue is, if you're going to say, Idit Saleh, if you're going to say the case where he already davened, and that's why Rabbi Yossi doesn't allow it, my time, my ode Rabbanan. What's the reason for the rabbis then? Why do the rabbis say you can go to the mikveh if he doesn't need to go to the mikveh because he's not planning to daven anymore and the day's almost over? So wait till the end of the day, go to the mikveh, and then say Ne'ilah. So why do the rabbis disagree with him? To which the Gemara says, Kasavre Rabbanan Tfilah B'zmana Mitzvah. The rabbis hold, and this is a whole very interesting concept, that going to the mikveh in its appropriate time is a special mitzvah. It's very important to go to the mikveh on time. Okay, so he must hold that way. Why is it such an important mitzvah? So Rav Avraham Stav has an article on the Yeshivat Har Etzion has a site, and they have something called the Daf Yom Yomi, and he has an article on the Sugya Nida, where this comes up about Tfilah B'zman mitzvah. We're actually going to quote the topic in a minute, the source there. He gives two approaches to what this idea of going to the mikveh in the appropriate time is. One option is to say that there's a mitzvah to purify yourself. And when you have an impurity upon you, there's a mitzvah to purify yourself. And therefore, when the time for that mitzvah comes, your job is to do it right away. And that's Tfilah B'zman mitzvah. So again, take our Baal Keri. This person had a seminal emission. He's supposed to go to the mikveh that day. Yes, it's Yom Kippur, but it's a mitzvah. It's important to go to the mikveh. So go to the mikveh. There's a mitzvah litahel, which actually connects a little bit with the idea of Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur is a purification day. We saw just the other day that Rabbi Akiva said that God is our mikveh Yisrael, right? And he is the one who gives us this mikveh. That's why it's almost interesting that it ends with mikveh and this idea of purification, because that's what's really happening on Yom Kippur. And it's a special mitzvah that day. But the second way of looking at it is that people often look at Tumah as something negative. You have something that you want to get rid of. Not so much, I want to be pure. I have this mitzvah to purify myself right now. But it's that I have something upon me that I want to get rid of. I want to get rid of it as quickly as possible. So it doesn't matter that I don't have a prayer I want to say right now or some need right now. But I want to get rid of my impurity as quickly as I possibly can. Okay, so we're going to come back to these ideas in a few minutes. So now we say it must be the rabbis hold Tfilah B'zman mitzvah. Therefore, even if you daven Ne'ilah and you have no other purpose for going to the mikveh, you have a purpose because, and even though it's Yom Kippur and you're not supposed to wash, we still want you to go to the mikveh because it's a mitzvah to do it at its proper time. So now they say, wait, so if that's the rabbi's reason, and Rabbi Yossi says no, because you don't have to daven Ne'ilah now, because you already daven Ne'ilah and you have no other prayer in front of you. So Rabbi Yossi must hold that Tfilah B'zmana is not a mitzvah. Seems reasonable. And that's the debate between them. Is going to the mikveh at its appropriate time a mitzvah or is it not a mitzvah? So Michalal, from here you can infer to Rabbi Yossi Savar lav mitzvah. But that's not going to work. Why is it not going to work? Because the Hatanya, it says in another Braita, Haresha haya shem katuv al b'saro. What's interesting is we're going back to something we learned in the beginning of the Masechet, which is if somebody has the name of God written on his skin. Very strange case, right? Somebody somehow wrote the name of God on his skin, and he's going to have some issues now. One of the issues is going to be, how does he go to the mikvah? How does he wash his body at all? He's going to erase the name of God. You can't erase the name of God. Pay attention to the words. There's obviously a connection to richitza and sicha, the two, right? 2 of the 5 things that you can't do on Yom Kippur, washing and anointing. You can't put oils on. You can't wash your body because you're going to rub off the name of God. You can't stand, you can't be in a bathroom, in an outhouse, because you can't do that. So how are we going to do that? So you can't, you're stuck. Mizdamnalo tfilat mitzvah. What if you have to do a tefillah for a mitzvah? you have to go to the mikvah because it's the day you're supposed to go. Something happened and now you have to go. You wrap a reed around your skin, you block it off, and you go to the mikvah and you hope that it doesn't really rub out. Maybe it's just kind of blocking it from rubbing out. Maybe you're also showing, I don't want it to rub out, even if it does. And then you're not really erasing the name of God, or it's at least not perceived that. Rabbi Yossi Omer, he says, go to the mikvah normally. Don't wait till you find a reed or something that you can cover yourself up with. Go right away. Why should you go right away? So that you fulfill this mitzvah of tefillah b'zman mitzvah. As long as you don't start rubbing it off while you're in the water. So make sure not to rub it, but go to the mikvah because, and it says there in the Gemara, Malan, they explain there, tefillah b'zman mitzvah plige. The whole machloket there is tefillah a mitzvah to go in its appropriate time or not? Rabbi Yossi thinks it is. The Tanna Kama thinks it's not. And what do you see here? Rabbi Yossi was the one who we just said doesn't hold the tefillah b'zman as mitzvah. So how can we have Rabbi Yossi saying one thing here, Rabbi Yossi saying something else somewhere else? To which the Gemara gives a very good answer, which is, what makes you think Rabbi Yossi and Rabbi Yossi are the same person? Hahi Rabbi Yossi bar Yehudai. The one who says that tefillah b'zmana is a mitzvah, is not a mitzvah, sorry. The one who says it's not a mitzvah, who was the one in our Braita, is Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, and not the other Rabbi Yossi, who's Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. The Gemara doesn't tell us this, but the commentaries say. Okay, I took a whole course in university on Klalei HaTalmud, which is all these rules about when you have someone's name and it comes without any ben so-and-so, who is it? There's all these rules. But sometimes the rules, obviously, like all rules, are broken, right? So Rabbi Yossi generally is Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta. In this case, we're going to assume it's Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda. Ditanya, as it says in a Braita. How do we know Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda is the one who says this? Because he says, and this is this machloket in Nida that I made reference to, I'm not going to get into the details of the case. It's very complicated. We'll learn it when we get to Nida. It's about a woman who has a miscarriage. She doesn't know when she miscarried. She doesn't know this. She's got all sorts of things. They come up with this crazy case where Beit Shammai says, because we don't know, maybe she was a Zava before, maybe she needs 7 clean days, maybe she needs this, maybe she that. We don't know when her real time to go to the mikveh is. She needs to go, actually, he says 95 different times, okay, within like a certain amount of days. It's an insane case. Beit Hillel drops it to 35, okay, which sounds a lot better than 95. But Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda says, Ditanya, Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, he says one time is sufficient. You just go the very last possible day. And she doesn't know what day her day is. She doesn't know if it's today, it's tomorrow, it's the day after, it's the day after that, whether it's morning, whether it's night, there's all different possibilities. So Beit Shammai says, since tefillah b'zman a mitzvah, and he takes it very seriously, says, go to the mikvah, all of those possible times. Beit Hillel cuts it down a little bit, and comes Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda, and he says, it doesn't matter tefillah b'zman a mitzvah, just go the very last day, where it's, at that point, she knows for sure she's pure, no matter what. Go that day, and you'll be fine. So there you see that Rabbi Yossi bar Yehuda doesn't think tefillah b'zman a mitzvah. So the Rabbi Yossi that says it's not a mitzvah is that Rabbi Yossi. And the other Rabbi Yossi is Rabbi Yossi ben Chalafta, and here we've resolved our issue. Now the Gemara says, Tanu Rabbanit, haro'eh keri b'yom kippurim. Now we get to this very last part. Before we get there, I actually want to say one more thing about this tefillah b'zman a mitzvah. What it made me think about, because we're ending our Masechet and we're thinking about Yom Kippurim and this idea of, I like this idea that Rav Stav brought up about the two ways of looking at it. Is it this idea that we're trying to purify ourselves and we want to do that when it's the appropriate time? Or is it this idea that we're trying to get rid of the impurity and we want to just get rid of it as quickly as possible? And I was thinking that Yom Kippur for different people means different things. And for some people, Yom Kippur means a day where I'm looking, like if you think about, let's start with the second one. Getting rid of impurity, right? I want to get rid of all my sins. We talked about the vidoy and all that. I want to get rid of, right? I'm trying to rid myself of all the bad that happened this year. But the other way of looking at it is I want to purify myself. I want to bring myself to a new place. I want to be somewhere else that I wasn't this year, right? It's sort of positive thinking and negative thinking, right? It's almost, am I trying to get rid of or am I trying to look forward? And also a little bit past future. Am I looking toward what I did or am I looking toward where I want to be? So I think that those same two concepts kind of relate to this idea of tefillah b'zman a mitzvah. I should just point out, because just so you don't think otherwise, nowadays we do not go to the mikveh anymore. And that's because, first of all, one of the reasons is some people think that if there's no more tum and tara, like we don't have a temple anymore, we're not careful about laws of purity and impurity in general. It's really just for relations between husband and wife. And that's no longer relevant because you can't do that on Yom Kippur anyway. So there's no need to go to the mikvah. Another possible reason is the tefillah b'zmana is no longer a mitzvah, some people say. Number one, because we don't really keep laws of purity and impurity the way they used to. And also because women now are safek zavot, okay? There's neither really, you're supposed to go to the mikvah the 7th day after your days of bleeding, not after waiting 7 clean days. Now women wait 7 clean days. So because of that, we're actually no longer in our bismana anymore. It's not really the original time. So therefore, there's no mitzvah of tefillah bismana mitzvah because we've missed the opportunity. We missed the time, which is another whole question about Yom Kippur. This idea of doing something in its exact time is also another interesting conceptual idea, which is if we want to do tshuva, there's a special time to do tshuva, whether it's the 10 days leading up to Yom Kippur itself, right? There's a special mitzvah to do it then. But it doesn't mean that you can't do it if you missed your chance, right? Let's say you didn't do a good enough job on Yom Kippur. You wake up the next day and you say, oh, my Yom Kippur just wasn't as meaningful as I wanted it to be. Do you say, oh, I have to wait till next year? No, I mean, yes, it's true. It has its appropriate time, but you also obviously always have an opportunity to do tshuva all year long. Now we're going to end with this very odd section. I would kind of prepare you for what's coming if you haven't seen this yet. Tanu Rabbanit. We now quote a bright. Again, we have this yeshavshef. It's used very differently here. The Braita quotes a case where somebody has a seminal emission in Yom Kippur. What do? You go to the mikvah, like we just saw, and at night you clean yourself off. Now, at night seems to be after. So the Gemara says, La Erev, why are you cleaning yourself after? The Gemara assumes why you're doing this. Go to the mikvah, you have to make sure you have nothing on your body. You have to be totally clean. So they say, well, why are you cleaning yourself after? My dahava hava, you already went to the mikvah. It's not going to help you, right? If you go to the mikvah and you're filthy and you after you walk out of the mikvah and you clean your body, that's not going to help you when you went to the mikvah. When you were in the mikvah, you had all this dirt that was creating a problem, a barrier. So they say, okay, no, that's not what it means. Ela ema mi ba'erev yeshavshef, meaning Erev Yom Kippur. Now, you didn't yet have a seminal emission, so what are they talking about? What they're saying is Erev Yom Kippur, you have to clean your body because maybe you will see Keri. You will have a seminal emission on Yom Kippur, and you want to make sure that you're clean enough that you can go to the mikveh if need be. This is very interesting. First of all, this reminds us of the beginning of the Masechet. Remember how the Masechet started out? Shivat Yamim Kodem Yom Kippurim Mafrishim Kohen Gadol Mimis Beito Lishkat Paradrin. We give him a different Kohen. We give him, right, even a different wife, according to someone. What are we worried about? We separate him from his wife. We separate him in general. We put him in the temple so that one of the issues is he doesn't have a seminal emission. Right? We have to prepare ourselves for this. So likewise here, we have to prepare ourselves before Yom Kippur by cleaning. Okay, this is only for men. Cleaning themselves in case they end up having this seminal emission. Now imagine, okay, now what's the idea of the seminal emission? So first of all, you're supposed to, a man is supposed to separate from his wife, a woman wife from her husband on Yom Kippur. Why? So that this doesn't happen, right? You can't have sexual relations, and all of that is forbidden. Now, you don't want to have a seminal emission. That's not a good thing. It's never really looked upon as a good thing, and certainly not in Yom Kippur when you're supposed to have what we call inui, which is some sort of suffering in this area, refraining from anything having to do with the sexual nature. Here you end up having the seminal emission. So try to, right, I'd say try to imagine yourself in the position of this person, right? So again, most of us are women, not all of us. The men, maybe it's a little easier. Try to imagine yourself in this position. You get to Yom Kippur and you've prepared, right? I'm assuming you had time to mentally prepare, get yourself into the mindset for Yom Kippur. What happens? You wake up in the morning or whatever it might be, and you have this seminal emission. Now, what's going to be your reaction? Terrible sign from God, right? That's what you're thinking. This is a bad sign, okay? I separated from my wife and, look what happened anyway. This is not going to be a good year for me. But what does the Gemara say? Something very strange. Tana kamei de Rav Nachman. A Tana brings a Braita, not a Tana, but someone who repeated the Braita by heart. He brings it in front of Rav Nachman. If you have a seminal emission on Yom Kippur, it's a good sign. It's a sign that all your sins have been pardoned. The Gemara says, what are you talking about? Tanya, doesn't it say in a Braita, avonotav stulim? Your sins are lined up. What, they're lined up as if to say, you have this sin, you have that sin, you have that sin, you have that sin. You're in bad shape. So how could you possibly say you're in good shape? This is a bad thing. So the Gemara says, oh no, that Braita doesn't contradict. My stulim limachel. Your sins are lined up so that God is going to go one by one and say, pardoned, 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 pardoned. As if this is a positive thing. Now, this is crazy. How could you say that having a seminal emission in Yom Kippur is a positive sign? It goes even farther. Tana de Rabbi Yishmael, in the house of Rabbi Yishmael, they brought this part. You should be worried all year long. Oh, already this is sounding more normal. Okay, so you have a seminal emission, you better start worrying. All year long, you have to be worried. But if you filled out the year, okay, now what this means, maybe it doesn't mean you had a good year, or at least you survived the year, you didn't die, okay? We don't know exactly what it means, but you finished your year up and you look like you're in good shape. Muftachlo shahu ben ha'olam haba. Now, this is the best thing you could ever get in a Gemara is you're going to make it into the world to come. So what are they telling you here? That someone who has a seminal emission has to worry. Maybe something terrible will happen, but if something terrible doesn't happen, it's the opposite. It's a sign that you are set for life. Why? Because you're whatever you've done in life, your merits must be standing there for you, and they're basically getting over the fact that you had. They're so great that that's going to get you into the world to come. Amar Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak. This is my most difficult line to teach in this whole section. The whole world is hungry and he is satiated. Now remember, we're supposed to be hungry, fasting, suffering. What are we suffering from in this case? We're suffering from tashmish hamita, from having sexual relations. This man had a seminal emission, which gave him a sort of feeling of having had a sexual encounter. And he is feeling satiated from that. And the rest of us are hungry. Now, this looks like it's a good thing for him because, right, to be hungry is never a good thing. Now, it's true on Yom Kippur, you're supposed to be. And the Mepharshim the commentaries grapple with what exactly this means. Some of them say God's not allowing him to afflict himself, almost like a punishment. Sounds a little bit like when we saw, if you sin, God doesn't help you to do tshuva, and if you do good things, God will help you to find the way back. But anyway, here, another option is to say that you don't need this affliction. You're saveh, you're satiated, because different people respond in different ways to different things, and different people have different needs. Maybe you don't need affliction in this way, and God is saying, okay, you can have a seminal emission, it doesn't matter. You're still afflicted because your affliction, you don't need that refraining from that. You're in a different place maybe than other people, which again goes back to this idea that things are somewhat individualized. Okay, right? Our path to tshuva, even though we kind of all do the same thing on Yom Kippur, but we know very well that nobody's Yom Kippur is the same as anybody else's. Everybody has their own internal going on and what they're thinking and what they're going through, and everyone has a very individual experience. And this is a little bit same. Ki'ata Rav Dimi Amar, last line of the daf. When Rav Dimi came from Israel, he said, "Mapish chaye sage umas." This is based on a pasuk that says, in Yeshayahu, Yir'eh zera ya'arich yamin. If you see seed, which is either the spilled seed here that came out of his body, you will have longevity. You'll have long life. Some people say it means actually, if you see zera on Yom Kippur, right, you'll have a long life and you'll have many, many children. That's this sage umaske. You'll have children and children's children, etc. As if this is all a really good thing. Now, this is very, very, very strange. And it's a very strange way to end the Masechet. Because I did point out, it ends the way it began. But what exactly is going on here? Why are we talking about the seminal emission? And why is the Gemara telling us that this is a good thing when all over we see carry's not a good thing? You have to go to the mikveh, you have to purify yourself. It's clearly not looked at as very positive. So I think this connects with something. And one of the benefits we have of learning at such a quick pace, right? Which some people will say, you shouldn't learn at such fast pace, and you don't always absorb everything. You don't always remember everything. And it's not the way to learn. It's not the way learning was meant to be. And this is a good example of when you learn at a quick pace and you see everything, right? And you see the entire Masechet almost at, right, it's almost all in front of you, even if you don't remember everything, but you remember highlights. There's themes that we've been talking about throughout that keep coming up. And it appears right here at the end of this Masechet, which is this idea, again, try to put yourself in the shoes of this man on Yom Kippur morning. And he wakes up with a seminal emission. And this is exactly like the Kohen Gadol who prepares, becomes Tameh. Or the seir dies in the middle of the temple, or the blood spills, or right, all these things that can happen. You can talk about whether this is voluntary, involuntary, right? There's all different ways of looking at this seminal emission, whether he was responsible, not responsible, whatever it is, the unexpected happens. And the idea is he can either take it and be totally depressed and say, I'm finished, and have a miserable Yom Kippur, or he could take it and turn it into something positive, right? We saw in the daf right before, which is the two in Pei Vav Amud Bet, if you do tshuva, your zdonot, the things you did purposely, all your transgressions, na'asolo kizchuyot, they become your merits. And by going through this experience, you actually come out a better person, right? You learn from your experience. And the idea here is that, there's different stages. There's the preparation, and you can't not do the preparation. That's what we said. The man should, Erev Yom Kippur, already prepare himself, wash, just in case, be prepared for any eventuality. On the other hand, know that I can prepare, and we all know this in life, we prepare, right? Man plans and God laughs, right? And that we don't know, we're not in control in the end. We try to control, but we're not in control. And that's what happens when the seminal emission comes. But the real challenge is what we do with that, how we take that experience and that situation and we turn it into something positive. And that's this idea of, waiting out the year or looking at it as a positive thing. If you take it as a positive sign that maybe God's trying to remind me of something, maybe you don't need it, maybe, right? There's all different ways of looking at it, but all about having a positive attitude. And I think it's something that we can take to our lives in general. Like these are things that we all go through in whatever way possible, which is we plan, things don't go exactly as planned. And then the real challenge is, how do we relate to when that happens? So that's what I think this Masechet is ending with. And with that idea, we will do the Hadrons, Hadron alach Yom Kippurim, Uslika la Masechet Yoma. That we finish Masechet Yoma. We will say the Hadrons together now. I'll put them up on the screen. It's also to everybody finishing. We're gonna, as usual, we're gonna say the Hadrons 3 times. Hadron alach Masechet Yoma, we'll say that 3 times, and then we'll continue with the other paragraphs. So we're gonna start right now. Hadron alach Masechet Yoma, v'hadrach halan, da'atan alach Masechet Yoma, v'da'atach halan, lo nitnashem minach Masechet Yoma, v'lo titnashem minan, lo ba'alma haden, v'lo ba'alma da'ate. Hadran alach Masechet Yoma, v'hadrach halan, da'atan alach Masechet Yoma, v'da'atach halan, lo nitnashem minach Masechet Yoma, v'lo titnashem minan, lo ba'alma haden, v'lo ba'alma da'ate. Hadran alach Masechet Yoma, v'hadrach halan, da'atan alach Masechet Yoma, v'da'atach halan, lo nitnashem minach Masechet Yoma, v'lo titnashem minan, lo ba'alma haden, v'lo ba'alma da'ate. Yihi ratzon lefanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'Elohei avotenu, שתהא תורתך אומנותנו בעולם הזה, ותהא עמנו לעולם הבא. חנינה בר פפא, רמי בר פפא, נחמן בר פפא, אחי בר פפא, אבא בר פפא, רחמן בר פפא, רחיש בר פפא, סורחה בר פפא, עדה בר פפא, דרו בר פפא. הערב נא אדוני אלוהינו את דברי תורתך בפינו ובפיפיות עמך בית ישראל, ונהיה אנחנו כולנו צאצאינו וצאצאי עמך בית ישראל, כולנו יודעי שמך, לומדי תורתך לשמה. מערבי תחכמני מצוותיך, כי לעולם היא לי. ויהי ליבי תמים בחוקיך, למען לא אבוש, לעולם לא אשכח פקודיך, כי בם חייתני. ברוך אתה אדוני, למדני חוקיך, אמן, 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 סלע ועד. יהי רצון מפניך אדוני אלוהי, כשם שעזרתני לסיים מסכת יומא, כן תעזרני להתחיל מסכתות וספרים אחרים ולסיימם, ללמוד וללמד, לשמור ולעשות ולקיים את כל דברי תלמוד תורתך באהבה. וזכות כל התנאים והאמוראים ותלמידי חכמים יעמוד לנו ולזרענו, שלא תמוש התורה מפינו ומפי זרענו עד עולם. ויתקיים בנו ותהלכך תנחה אותך, ושוכבך תשמור עליך, והקיצותה היא תשיחך. כי בי ירבו ימיך ויוסיפו לך שנות חיים, אורך ימים בימינה ושמאלה עושר וכבוד, אדוני עוז ועמו ייתן, אדוני יברך את עמו בשלום. Shukach to everybody. Big round of applause for everyone. We're going to just quickly read, even though we kind of started learning already, we'll just read the first Mishnah in Sukkah, as is customary to do at a Siyum. So I'll just read the first Mishnah. Sukkah shehi gvoha lamala me'aschim ama psula. The sukkah is taller than 20 cubits. It's disqualified. Rabbi Yehuda machshir. There's a big debate about it, whether this is okay or not. V'she'ena gvoha asara tfachim. It has to be at least 10 tfachim off the ground. V'she'en la shalosh tfanot. It needs to have 3 walls. V'shechamatam uba mitzilata. The sun, more sun is coming in than shade. It's psula. It's disqualified.